Just 5 minutes before Princess Anne's high-profile Windsor event was set into motion, something extraordinary reportedly happened behind palace walls. Just 5 minutes before Princess Anne's high-profile Windsor event was set into motion, something extraordinary reportedly happened behind palace walls. Names quietly disappeared from the final guest registry. Invitations connected to Queen Camilla's private circle were allegedly removed without warning. No public announcement, no explanation, just silence, tension, and a move insiders are already calling Prince William's coldest display of authority yet. And according to whispers from royal aides, this was not a mistake. It was deliberate. At first, the changes seemed too small to trigger alarm. A revised seating arrangement here. A delayed confirmation there. But according to palace administrative whispers, the atmosphere inside Windsor shifted dramatically in the hours leading up to Anne's event. Staff members who normally moved with calm precision were suddenly operating under intense scrutiny. Security personnel allegedly received updated instructions directly from senior aides connected to Kensington Palace, while several names tied to Queen Camilla's private social network reportedly vanished from approved access lists altogether. The removals were said to be quiet, clinical, almost surgical in execution. No raised voices, no visible confrontation. Yet insiders insist the tension hanging over Windsor that afternoon felt heavier than anything the family had experienced in months. Reports suggest Prince William personally reviewed the final guest registry only hours before the ceremony began. That detail alone reportedly sent waves through palace circles because such intervention is considered highly unusual for an event tied so closely to Princess Anne. 4 years, and has operated as one of the monarchy's most disciplined figures, someone deeply protective of royal structure, hierarchy, and institutional order. Sources familiar with the planning now claimed the event itself carried symbolic weight far beyond public understanding. What appeared outwardly to be another polished royal engagement was allegedly viewed internally as a statement about continuity, loyalty, and the future direction of the crown during one of the monarchy's most uncertain periods. And that uncertainty has only intensified since King Charles's ongoing health struggles reportedly weakened the balance of influence behind palace walls. According to several royal insiders, Queen Camilla's allies expected unusually prominent visibility at the Windsor gathering. Some allegedly believed the Queen's social circle had secured a stronger foothold within royal operations over recent years, particularly during Charles's reign. But different interpretations of the situation suggest William had grown increasingly uneasy with what some courtiers described as blurred institutional lines. Those whispers became louder after reports emerged claiming tensions between William and Camilla had been quietly escalating for weeks behind closed doors. Private meetings reportedly became more guarded. Communications between households allegedly turned colder. Even long-serving aides were said to notice subtle but unmistakable changes in tone whenever discussions involved ceremonial planning or public positioning. The most explosive detail, however, allegedly came when several removed guests contacted Camilla privately after discovering their credentials no longer worked. That was reportedly the moment confusion inside her circle turned into humiliation. Sources claim Camilla herself was not informed in advance about the removals and only learned the full extent of the situation through frantic calls shortly before the event officially began. For some observers, that detail transformed the incident from a routine protocol adjustment into something much more personal. Not merely an administrative correction, but a deliberate message about power, authority, and who truly controls access within the modern monarchy. And as the icy silence inside Windsor deepened, insiders began whispering that this conflict was no longer simply about one event or one guest list. It was becoming a struggle over influence itself. To the public, it looked like another formal royal engagement filled with tradition, polished smiles, and carefully staged photographs. But palace insiders now suggest Princess Anne's gathering was something far more serious. Behind the ceremonial language and velvet-lined halls, the event reportedly symbolized a quiet consolidation of royal authority, one that may have excluded Camilla's influence entirely. In the hours after whispers spread about the mysterious guest list removals, attention inside royal circles quickly shifted toward the deeper purpose of Anne's gathering itself. According to several interpretations circulating among palace aides, this was never intended to be an ordinary appearance built around ceremony alone. Reports suggest the event centered around institutions closely tied to Queen Elizabeth II's long-standing vision for the monarchy, organizations viewed internally not simply as charities or ceremonial bodies, but as extensions of the late Queen's personal legacy. That detail immediately raised the stakes because within the House of Windsor, anything connected to Elizabeth's legacy carries enormous symbolic weight. And insiders now claim Prince William understood that better than anyone. Sources familiar with internal planning allege William played a direct role in shaping the structure of the event long before invitations were finalized. Private consultations reportedly took place between William and across several weeks, with discussions focused not only on protocol but on the message the gathering would quietly send during this fragile chapter of the monarchy. King Charles's ongoing health struggles have reportedly intensified fears about instability behind palace walls, and some insiders believe and William increasingly view themselves as guardians of continuity during a period filled with uncertainty. That belief allegedly transformed the Windsor event into something much larger than a formal engagement. Palace observers now describe it as part of a broader resurgence of the so-called Old Guard, a faction deeply committed to discipline, hierarchy, and preserving what they see as the sacred institutional structure built by Queen Elizabeth II over decades of relentless duty. According to reports emerging from royal administrative circles, some senior staff privately referred to the gathering as a restoration moment. The phrase reportedly circulated quietly among aides in the days leading up to the event, triggering speculation that the ceremony represented an effort to reassert traditional power structures inside the monarchy. That interpretation gained momentum after sources claimed Queen Camilla's allies expected unusually prominent placement within the event itself. Several individuals connected to her wider social network were allegedly anticipating elevated seating positions, enhanced visibility, and increased proximity to senior royals. But according to insiders familiar with final preparations, those expectations collided directly with William's increasingly firm approach to institutional boundaries. The atmosphere reportedly became even more tense when security arrangements surrounding the gathering changed at the last minute. Palace staff allegedly received revised instructions tied to guest movement, access routes, and restricted areas shortly before attendees began arriving. While no official explanation was ever offered publicly, insiders insist the sudden tightening of procedures reflected growing concern behind the scenes. Some observers interpreted the changes as evidence of deepening distrust within royal operations themselves. Others viewed them as part of a deliberate effort to ensure the focus remained entirely on William and the legacy institutions associated with Queen Elizabeth's reign. Either way, the message reportedly became impossible to ignore. 4 years, Princess Anne has been viewed as one of the monarchy's most uncompromising defenders of tradition. William, meanwhile, has increasingly stepped into a role defined by authority, caution, and long-term strategic thinking. And according to palace whispers, their alliance has quietly strengthened during months of growing instability around the crown. What happened at Windsor reportedly reflected that alliance in its clearest form. Not loud, not chaotic, but coldly precise. The kind of institutional maneuver that reveals far more through silence than open confrontation ever could. 4 years, Queen Camilla's network reportedly expanded quietly through social alliances, private introductions, and carefully managed palace influence. But insiders now claim Prince William had finally reached a breaking point. And according to several interpretations of recent palace tensions, Anne's event became the moment he decided to draw a line that could no longer be ignored. By the time preparations for the Windsor gathering entered their final stage, whispers about growing divisions inside the royal household were already circulating among staff, advisors, and long-time palace observers. What once appeared to outsiders as a stable royal structure had reportedly become layered with competing loyalties, silent rivalries, and carefully concealed frustration. According to insiders, William had spent months watching influence shift behind closed doors while King Charles remained increasingly consumed by health concerns and the exhausting pressures surrounding the crown. During that period, reports suggest Camilla's wider social circle quietly strengthened its visibility within royal operations through strategic appearances, private access, and expanding relationships with influential palace figures. To some, those developments looked harmless. To others, they represented something far more dangerous, a gradual reshaping of institutional balance at the very center of the monarchy. Sources close to palace administration now claim William viewed Anne's event as institutionally critical precisely because it represented continuity with Queen Elizabeth II's long-standing philosophy of duty before personal interest. That is reportedly why he became unusually involved in the planning process. Insiders suggest he feared the symbolism of the gathering could be diluted if competing factions within royal circles used the occasion to reinforce their own standing. According to several interpretations of internal discussions, William had grown increasingly concerned about what one palace figure allegedly described as the blurring of royal boundaries. That phrase reportedly referred to fears that social influence and ceremonial authority were beginning to overlap in ways the future king considered deeply destabilizing. As tensions intensified, palace administrative staff allegedly noticed abrupt changes in event protocols. Invitations that had already been quietly approved were suddenly flagged for what insiders called internal review. Seating charts reportedly underwent late revisions. Access routes were adjusted. Even guest movement inside Windsor allegedly became subject to stricter oversight than normal. For long-time staff members accustomed to royal events operating with predictable precision, the atmosphere reportedly felt unusually strained. One courtier allegedly described the mood as controlled but explosive, a phrase that quickly spread through private conversations among aides. No one expected open confrontation, but many reportedly sensed that something larger was unfolding beneath the polished surface of royal formality. At the center of that growing tension stood the increasingly powerful alliance between William and Princess Anne. For years, and has been regarded as one of the monarchy's most relentless defenders of institutional discipline, someone who values structure over popularity and loyalty over comfort. Insiders claim William has gravitated toward that same philosophy as pressures surrounding the future of the crown continued to mount. Their shared concerns about preserving royal tradition reportedly deepened after Queen Elizabeth II's death, especially as the monarchy entered an era filled with uncertainty, public scrutiny, and shifting influence behind palace walls. According to reports, Anne's event became more than a ceremonial occasion. It became a quiet test of control itself. Meanwhile, members of Camilla's extended social network allegedly remained confident they would maintain prominent visibility during the gathering. Some reportedly believed their standing within royal circles had become secure enough to withstand any internal disagreement. But insiders now claim they underestimated how determined William had become. Because by the final hours before the event, what began as subtle procedural changes had allegedly evolved into something far more serious. The guest list controversy was no longer simply about etiquette, optics, or ceremonial hierarchy. It was becoming a warning about power, access, and the invisible lines William reportedly believed should never be crossed within the monarchy again. By the time guests arrived at Windsor, the operation was reportedly already complete. Security credentials had allegedly been altered, access permissions updated, and according to sources familiar with royal event logistics, several individuals connected to Camilla's private network suddenly found themselves unable to move beyond restricted palace checkpoints. What made the situation so unsettling, according to insiders, was not the existence of tighter security itself, but the precision with which everything allegedly unfolded. There were no dramatic confrontations in public corridors, no visible arguments between royal households, no sudden scenes for cameras to capture. Instead, reports suggest the adjustments were carried out with cold efficiency behind the scenes long before the first official arrivals stepped through Windsor's gates. Security teams reportedly received revised instructions only shortly before guest entry began, leaving many staff members stunned by how quickly long-approved access routes had changed. Some aides allegedly believed the revisions originated directly from senior figures connected to Prince William's office, though no formal confirmation was ever offered publicly. Even so, whispers inside palace walls spread rapidly. Something significant was happening, and everyone present reportedly understood it. According to sources familiar with the event, guests associated with Camilla's wider social network were quietly redirected away from key reception areas moments after arriving. Some allegedly found themselves unable to access private corridors or designated gathering rooms they had expected to enter without issue. Others reportedly experienced unexplained delays while palace staff calmly reviewed credentials that had supposedly already been cleared days earlier. Insiders claimed the goal was not humiliation in front of the public, but containment. One royal observer allegedly described the strategy as surgical rather than dramatic, emphasizing that every move appeared designed to avoid visible chaos while still delivering an unmistakable message. And perhaps that was what made the atmosphere feel even colder. The silence surrounding the removals carried more weight than open confrontation ever could. Throughout the unfolding tension, Princess Anne reportedly continued her preparations without any outward disruption. That detail has only deepened speculation about how much she allegedly knew beforehand. 4 decades, and has cultivated a reputation for discipline, emotional control, and absolute loyalty to institutional order. According to palace insiders, she refused to allow internal conflict to distract from the significance of the gathering itself. Reports suggest she remained entirely focused on the event's symbolic importance, even as anxiety quietly spread among staff members behind closed doors. Some aides later claimed her composure actually intensified the pressure inside Windsor because it signaled that the operation unfolding around the guest list was not accidental confusion. It was planned, controlled, intentional. Meanwhile, Prince William reportedly remained calm throughout the entire process. Several insiders allegedly described him as completely unmoved, even as confusion rippled through parts of Camilla's social circle. That detail has become one of the most discussed aspects of the controversy because it reinforced growing perceptions about William's evolving role within the monarchy. According to some royal commentators, the future king no longer appears willing to tolerate what he reportedly views as competing centers of influence around the crown. Instead, they claim he is increasingly acting with the authority of someone already preparing for a far larger responsibility. And for many observers inside royal circles, the Windsor incident became a defining example of that transformation. Quiet authority replacing hesitation, institutional control replacing compromise. As the event finally moved forward, the public remained largely unaware of the tensions unfolding beneath the polished surface of royal unity. Smiles were maintained. Formalities proceeded. The monarchy presented its usual image of composure and continuity. But insiders insist the emotional undercurrents behind palace walls told a completely different story. Because while some figures within Windsor reportedly viewed the removals as necessary protection of royal structure, others allegedly saw them as the beginning of something much more dangerous, a silent battle for influence now unfolding at the highest levels of the monarchy itself. In the immediate aftermath of the Windsor gathering, reports suggest several individuals connected to the removed guest list privately contacted palace offices searching for explanations. Some allegedly believed there had been a technical mistake. Others reportedly assumed security staff had acted independently without authorization. But as hours passed and no clarification emerged, the mood inside Camilla's wider circle is said to have shifted from confusion to disbelief. According to insiders, what unsettled many of them most was not simply the removals themselves, but the realization that no senior figure appeared willing to reverse the decision once it had been carried out. That silence reportedly carried a brutal emotional weight because within royal culture, silence is often interpreted as approval from higher authority. And if that interpretation was correct, then the implications were far more serious than anyone initially imagined. Sources close to royal operations claim Camilla's allies viewed the incident as deeply humiliating, particularly because it unfolded during an event so closely associated with princess and an institutional legacy. Several observers allegedly believed the removals exposed a growing imbalance of influence behind palace walls, one where William's authority was becoming increasingly difficult to challenge. According to some palace interpretations, this was no longer simply about ceremonial protocol or guest arrangements. It reflected a broader struggle over proximity to the future monarchy itself. And for figures who had reportedly spent years building relationships, access, and visibility around the crown, the sudden restrictions felt like an unmistakable signal that the internal landscape was changing faster than expected. Perhaps even more revealing were claims that King Charles himself was informed only after much of the situation had already unfolded. Royal insiders now whisper that the king's delayed awareness intensified concerns surrounding communication between royal households. Some sources alleged Charles was left frustrated by the timing and increasingly exhausted by the growing strain between competing factions inside the family. Since the beginning of his reign, he has reportedly struggled to maintain balance between loyalty to Camilla and the rising authority of William as future king. But according to palace whispers, Windsor may have exposed how fragile that balance had truly become. Because while Charles reportedly favored stability and avoidance of open conflict, William appeared increasingly willing to act decisively when institutional boundaries were involved. Meanwhile, Princess and allegedly refused to alter the event schedule despite mounting internal tension. Insiders claimed she remained entirely committed to ensuring the gathering proceeded without disruption, even as anxiety quietly spread among staff and attendees behind closed doors. That determination reportedly reinforced her reputation as one of the monarchy's most uncompromising figures. Some palace observers now believe and viewed the controversy as secondary to a much larger responsibility, protecting the integrity of royal institutions during a period of instability. And according to several commentators, William's actions reflected a similar mindset. His handling of the removals has since been described by some royal analysts as calculated institutional control, a phrase that has only fueled speculation about how far he may be willing to go to shape the monarchy's future. Behind the scenes, discussions surrounding loyalty, influence, and access reportedly intensified almost immediately after the event ended. Palace staff allegedly feared media leaks if tensions escalated further, particularly because rumors about private confrontations were already beginning to circulate among royal correspondents. Some aides reportedly worried the conflict could trigger long-term fractures between royal households at a moment when the monarchy could least afford additional instability. Yet, despite those fears, insiders claimed the most important questions still remained unanswered. Because according to those closest to the situation, the Windsor incident was not an isolated dispute born from one event alone. It was the visible eruption of tensions that had reportedly been building quietly for far longer than the public realized. Long before the guest list controversy erupted, insiders had reportedly noticed something changing inside the royal structure itself. Princess Anne and Prince William were spending more time aligned on major decisions, more private consultations, more coordinated appearances. And according to palace interpretations, Anne's event may have revealed the true strength of that alliance for the very first time. 4 years, Princess Anne has occupied a unique position within the monarchy. She has never relied on glamour, media fascination, or carefully crafted public mystique to maintain influence. Instead, insiders say her authority has always come from something far more enduring: discipline, consistency, and an unwavering belief that the institution must survive regardless of personal discomfort. That philosophy reportedly left a deep impression on Prince William as pressures surrounding the crown intensified over recent years. According to palace whispers, William increasingly began viewing Anne not simply as a respected aunt, but as one of the last remaining figures capable of guiding the monarchy through an era filled with uncertainty, internal division, and mounting public scrutiny. And as King Charles's health struggles reportedly weakened the stability of the royal structure, that bond between Anne and William allegedly became stronger than ever behind closed doors. Sources familiar with royal operations claim Anne has quietly become one of William's most trusted advisors. Not through formal declarations or public announcements, but through repeated moments of strategic alignment. Private consultations reportedly became more frequent following Queen Elizabeth II's death, especially during discussions surrounding royal appearances, institutional priorities, and long-term planning for the future crown. Several insiders now believe Anne's influence over William stems from their shared view that monarchy survives only when duty remains stronger than personal alliances. According to palace interpretations, that mindset shaped every decision surrounding the Windsor event. What looked publicly like a polished royal gathering allegedly carried a deeper internal message. The monarchy was returning to firm before family thinking. And for some within royal circles, that shift represented reassurance. For others, it represented danger. The fallout surrounding Camilla's reduced influence reportedly sent shock waves through parts of her wider social network, precisely because many insiders had assumed her standing within the institution had become untouchable. During Charles's reign, Camilla's visibility and symbolic importance steadily grew, and some observers believed that influence would naturally extend into broader royal operations over time. But according to palace whispers, Anne and William increasingly viewed the monarchy through a colder, more institutional lens, one focused less on social positioning and more on preserving structure, hierarchy, and continuity for the generations ahead. That difference in philosophy allegedly became impossible to ignore during the Windsor controversy. Because while Camilla's allies reportedly expected accommodation and visibility, William appeared increasingly determined to reinforce boundaries instead. Palace observers now describe William as far more confident in exercising authority than he appeared even a year earlier. Some insiders believe the combination of public pressure, family instability, and Charles's health challenges has accelerated his transformation into a figure already operating with the instincts of a reigning monarch. The Windsor incident reportedly reinforced that perception dramatically. According to several commentators, William no longer seems interested in avoiding internal friction if he believes institutional discipline is at risk. And with and standing beside him, that authority reportedly carries even greater weight inside palace walls. Because and represents continuity with an older royal philosophy shaped directly by Queen Elizabeth II herself, a philosophy where survival of the institution always outweighs personal comfort or emotional compromise. Yet, amid the growing alliance between Anne and William, King Charles reportedly remains trapped in an increasingly painful position. Insiders claim he continues struggling to balance loyalty to his wife with recognition of William's rising authority and Anne's institutional influence. That emotional tension, according to palace whispers, has quietly become one of the defining pressures of his reign. And many observers now believe the confrontation surrounding Anne's event may shape royal dynamics for years to come. Not because of the guest removals alone, but because it exposed how power inside the monarchy may already be shifting toward a new generation of control. What stunned royal watchers most was not the alleged removals themselves, but the silence that followed. No denials, no corrections, no carefully crafted palace clarification, just an unmistakable stillness hanging over Windsor. And within royal circles,